Hello and welcome to Forever Red Devils, and very, very interesting week ahead for Manchester United. A return to the Europa League tomorrow night, and some very interesting stories. Obviously, we've got a lot of transfer news at the moment. Official bids for Patrick Dorgu, for initial offers from Napoli. Marcus Rashford in talks with Barcelona. I think apparently met in Lisbon, and a very interesting story about Ruben Amorim and his sort of reaction to losing to Brighton over the weekend, which I think is going to say a lot about where the squad is, and be very interested to see how Ruben Amorim reacts moving forward, and what the press conference, because there's an interesting story about him, about the hair dry treatment that apparently came after that Brighton loss. So lots to get into. And if you are new to the channel, make sure you smash like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well. On the road to 500 subscribers, we will have live training coming at I think it's about an hour's time. We'll be able to get an idea of who's going to be involved, for example, whether we saw Marcus Rashford and the likes, and that'll be interesting to see who is give an indication on who we might see in the coming few days, or tomorrow, and obviously the weekend. But let's start with the big Ruben Amorim news. Now, stories are coming out that apparently Ruben Amorim lost his temper after the Brighton result, and gave what was considered the traditional hairdryer treatment to a squad that obviously Alex Ferguson was so well known for, and apparently it went as far as a TV being damaged after he threw what sounds like quite a large tantrum, and basically telling his team what's what and what. He labeled him the worst team in United's history, and I think probably told them as much inside the changing room after the game. So very, very interesting to see that, first of all, that he has that side to him. I think we've seen that he is quite a reserved guy when he needs to, but especially on the side of the field, for example, I think the passion does come out. And what for me is going to be so interesting is the fact that these players now being told what they've needed to have been told for a while, and that is that a lot of them aren't good enough, a lot of them aren't working hard enough, and a lot of them aren't, at the moment, the way they're playing, fit to wear the United jersey, and a very big rude awakening. Now, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? In terms of, is it some of the players' faults? For example, they're simply not good enough. I think it's a symptom of us signing really poor players, and you sometimes got to feel for players who just simply are doing their best, but they're just not really good enough. But I think what we've seen many times over the years is players who've got the wrong attitude, that aren't working hard enough, and there's no excuse for that. At the end of the day, if a player's got the right attitude, they train well, they work really hard, they're working hard on the pitch, and they're simply not good enough, no one's going to begrudge them for that. Some fans will, but majority of people will just sort of accept that, like the player, like the attitude, just simply not of United quality. I think we've got too many players that aren't of United quality, but also then think that we've got too many players who maybe might be of United quality, but don't have the mentality and don't have the work ethic, don't have, what it takes to become a United player. And it sounds like Ruben Amorim basically almost sort of told a lot of these players exactly that. And apparently the TV, which they use as a tactics board, and they put up clips and stuff like that, is going to have to be repaired before Thursday. And what's quite interesting is that traditionally Ruben Amorim doesn't talk to a squad immediately after a game. Apparently I think he's one of those that likes to reflect on how the game went, for example, and what they can improve on and the likes, and then kind of get stuck into what's going on the next day, rather than an immediate reaction immediately after the whistle. Where sometimes emotions get the better of you. It very much sounded like emotions did get the better of him. And you can understand why. You can really understand why. Because coming off three really positive results, to go and lose in that fashion is just so unacceptable. And this is the problem. Every single time we get an opportunity to try and take a step forward, we keep bluffing it. Now, what's quite interesting is that whole Manchester United is the worst. He said. Let's look at the quote exactly, shall we? So, in terms of the worst United team ever. So, the official quote was, "Imagine what this is for a fan of Manchester United. Imagine what this is for me. We are getting a new coach who is losing more than the last coach. I have full knowledge of that. We are the worst team maybe in the history of Manchester United. I know the media headlines, but I want to say that because we have to acknowledge that and to change that. Here you go, your headlines." So I mean, he's trying to pass it off in terms of that's what they're going to say, but at the end of the day, he has said we are maybe the worst team in United's history. Very, very interesting thing to say, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction is. A lot of the media have taken quite exception to that. Like a lot of the fans, I think, are saying it's quite right, and saying that he should acknowledge that they're really, really poor. The problem is, if he loses the dressing room, he's nowhere. And this is the big thing. What is going to be the reaction of the players from a comment like that, from a potential, tantrum and talking to like after the game? Are these players going to respond well and acknowledge the fact that they're not been good enough and acknowledge the fact that what we saw on Sunday is unacceptable? And are they going to dig deep, start working hard, trying to get themselves back on, the right path and try and get ourselves back into the mix? Or are we going to see players who are going to put their hands up and say, you know what, I actually don't need to do this. I actually don't need to be in an environment like this. I don't need to be sit here and shouted at to be told I'm terrible. I can put in a transfer request. I can get out of here. I actually don't need to do this. I don't need the pressure. I don't need the treatment. I can find a better off place elsewhere. And if that's the case, I think a lot of fans will say, well, then off you go. If you're not ready to be able to accept where you are and be able to acknowledge the part you played in being possibly the worst United team, and you're not ready to try and be part of the solution, then get out the club. And I think that's what a lot of players might do. I think we are going to see a bit of an exodus because what I'm hoping is that conversations, quotes like this, reactions like this, is going to start to wheedle out the players that have the right mentality and the players that don't. And we need to start making sure that we've got a squad of players who are the right type of players. And we've always used very recently we've been using the example of Harry Maguire, a player who's just knuckled down, he's got on with the job, he's embraced the criticism, and he's gone and proven a lot of people wrong. So many other people are not doing that. Right now, the Marcus Rashford situation, it looks really, really bad on his behalf. I think for years and years, everybody was right behind Rashford in terms of understanding why it was so difficult for him and understanding why, he really struggled. And I think we all, so many people were behind him because the club was in such a mess. But then, you see him coming out and say he needs a new challenge, and he's evidently not training well. He's evidently basically made his decision. He's halfway out the door. So he's going to leave under really, really bad circumstances where I think a lot of the United fans who were behind him and very loyal to him have changed their loyalty and now look at him saying, well, we get out my club, basically. If you don't care for us enough to be able to, basically set aside your ego and get back into training and get yourself sorted and try and help the club, we don't want people like you in the club. And I think that's the reality. I think that's the two things can be true. I think Marcus Rashford has had a lot of time where he was unfairly scapegoated, unfairly targeted. But acting like the way he has the last 2 months has not helped that. And the sooner he gets that move away, the better. Now, speaking of Marcus Rashford, a report is saying that this week he met with Barcelona Chiefs. I actually want to go and look at the official post. Where was it? So this is from Bitty Romano, by the way. So there's a Romano update saying Marcus Rashford's camp had a meeting with Barca director Deco today. This was yesterday. He said it took place in Lisbon. Barcelona are keen on signing Rashford, and he's open to the move, but depends on exits. Looking at Eric Garcia between Como and Girona and Ansu Fati's situation. Borussia Dortmund apparently also still interested. And this is the thing, when Marcus Rashford was first, touted to leave, a lot of people are saying, well, he's not going to be able to find a decent club. Nobody's going to want him. Clubs will take a risk on him on loan because we've seen what he can do previously. So Barcelona and AC Milan and Borussia Dortmund would look at Marcus Rashford and say, yeah, first of all, they won't cover all the wages. That's going to be the case. So where's the risk? You are signing a potential world-class player. And if you can get it right, fantastic. Maybe you come into the summer and you say, right, 50, 60 mil, can we get this player done? If he doesn't perform, for example, then they all go, well, no worries. Off he goes back to United, and it was a worthwhile experiment. It didn't work, but we're no worse off than we are. We might not be better off, but we're no worse off than we were before we tried to sign him. So I think that signing Marcus Rashford alone is a move that a lot of clubs will pursue because of the potential, and the risk to reward ratio is very high. Because again, you won't pay a loan fee. You're not going to cover all his wages because it's on too big wages that United base just need to try and shift more somewhere. And it's going to be a loan deal and there'll be no obligation to buy. And given the fact that there's no obligation to buy, there's no risk, really. He's not a player who, he's had a few injury issues, but I think, he's generally quite fit. And he hasn't played football, obviously, in a while. But you can get him playing quite quickly. And hopefully get him up to speed quite quickly. And if he does, what's a successful move? If he goes and scores you 7, 8, 9 goals in a 6-month period, 5-month period, that for me is a successful move. And I think he will do that. I think he's somebody, if he goes to Borussia Dortmund, I think he'll come back with 10 goals, and 5 or 6 assists. I think that he'll have a similar sort of thing, career to what we saw Jadon Sancho have last season. I still think he's more than good enough to be playing in some of the best teams in the world, but he needs a bit of a reset. And that I think is going to be interesting to see where that reset actually comes from. Now, other sort of news is that Manchester United's formal bid for Patrick Dorgu was worth £23 million plus add-ons. Apparently not enough to convince Lecce, who apparently want around £34 million. Napoli are interested, but there are supposed to be more contacts between the clubs. £34 million is probably about £6 million more than I'd like to spend. I think anything in the 20s, I think, will be a decent deal. At the end of the day, we're buying him from Lecce, not one of the top Serie A clubs. Yes, he's been playing for 2-3 seasons in the Serie A. He's still 20 years old, though, and still a lot starting to prove in terms of his ability. So, yeah, I think £34 million would be quite a lot of money. I mean, it's not a massive amount of money when you think of what we paid for Anthony, what you paid for Højlund, for example. But we are trying to be far more clever with our signs. I think also the main thing is that we're trying to always not give in and just play what we've been told to pay. We're trying to get away from being the club where, we say 23, they say 34. We say 24, they say 34. We say 26, they say 34. We say 28, they say 34. You get to deadline day, we end up paying the 34. And, it becomes a rolling case of us never being able to not pay the given transfer fee because clubs just know that we will do it. So we actually need to be able to say no a few times. We need to actually almost sort of stand our ground and say, actually, no, we're not going to pay you what we think is an overvalued or overpriced fee. We're going to offer you what we think he's worth. And we might be willing to go up a little, for example, but we're not going to pay more than what we think he's worth. We're not going to pay what you think he's worth. We're going to pay what we think he's worth. And the more we start to do that, the less clubs will be able to sort of take advantage of us. And we might miss players. And it's an interesting one because some fans, for example, will sit there and say that that's the wrong attitude you have. You can't afford to miss players like Patrick Dorgu, for example. And maybe that is true to a certain degree. But at the same time, we can't also afford to always be a yes man club where we just bow to everybody else's wishes and end up paying whatever they want us to pay, rather than what we think is a fair transfer fee. So we'll continue to monitor that sort of situation. Similarly, for example, we have decided that £42 million for Garnacho is also not enough. So apparently we want more. Apparently Antonio Conte is pushing for it. Chelsea have inquired about him and have made contact with the player and are deciding whether to submit a bid or not. I would love to see about £60 million for Garnacho. I really think if we can get £60-70 million, it's a lot of money. But at the end of the day, we are talking about a player who is, one of the current generational talents, one of the big young players. And, why can't we as United decide, well, we think he's worth £60 million, therefore pay £60 million. You think about the amount of sort of transfer fees that Chelsea managed to get over the years for players who I don't think are nearly as good as Garnacho, not as young, not as already successful in a top league. So I really hope that we do hold out and that we try and make sure that whatever we get for Garnacho is something that we decide is enough, because far too many times we've paid far too much. Then when it comes to us selling, then we don't get anywhere near what we want to get. So it's always a frustrating conundrum, and yeah, again, it's all kind of about sort of writing the narrative, isn't it? It's about making sure that the narrative is not United will pay whatever other clubs want us to pay, and we're going to pay what we think players are worth, and we're going to sell for what we think players are worth. A very interesting story, by the way, is that Erik ten Hag could be set to return to management. So big news this morning coming out of Dortmund saying that they officially sacked their manager Nurin Sahin, and are currently now on the lookout. Now, Laurie Whitwell is reporting that Erik ten Hag has no plans to return to management before July, but is being linked to the Dortmund job. And that would be an interesting one in terms of the Rashford deal, because obviously Rashford initially did very well under Erik ten Hag, and ten Hag would know about Rashford. So what would be interesting is, given the fact that Borussia Dortmund are currently looking at Marcus Rashford if they then go and look at Erik ten Hag, is that going to be a good thing for ten Hag or bad thing for ten Hag? Will he want to sign Rashford? Will he not want to sign Rashford? So very, very interesting to see how that kind of also sort of unfolds, and whether we do see Erik ten Hag back in Manchester. Because I think at the end of the day, he's a good enough manager to be at clubs like a Borussia Dortmund. He did get a reasonable amount of success at United at certain times. Obviously this past season was just untenable. The results were just not good enough, and we had to make a change. But I did think that he showed at times very much that he has the pedigree to be a top manager. So very interested to see where he goes. Very interested to see whether he considers going to the Dortmund and what that deal might look like. Just to finish off then, a little bit of word on Antony. So at this stage, no further update from Antony. Fabrizio Romano was reporting earlier this week that there was a verbal agreement between the clubs and agents and players, and Antony was set to sign for Real Betis. He then said that Antony was set to undergo a medical. That was supposed to be yesterday. Spanish newspaper AS is saying that the final details have now all been agreed, and this was last night, and Antony was supposedly supposed to be hours away after a successful meeting in Seville. So yeah, hopefully we will see him being announced either today or tomorrow, but that bar fairly medical, looks like that deal will go through, and we will officially have our first sort of departure. No real more updates really on Casemiro, which is a bit worrying. Somebody who we were hoping to kind of offload in this window. No big updates there, and I was really hoping that we're going to get some sort of transfer fee out from him. When if he does move to Saudi, obviously it frees up a lot of transfer, wages as well if he does go. Now, apparently, I think from the sounds of it, I think it's not so much for a case of we not want him to go, but that maybe we're not really getting the buyers. So I'm not entirely sure why that's all kind of gone cold. We're going to have to wait and see if anybody else picks up the tax. But I think that, Saudi is probably the only real place he could potentially go in terms of being able to afford big wages for a player like him, who is currently showing that maybe he's not quite ready to be playing, or not quite there to be playing in the highest leagues anymore. So but hopefully we can update on that as the week goes on. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Which of these players would you like to see, and what kind of transfer fees would you like to see? And we'll have a video a little later to confirming some training and the likes, and we'll also be giving an update if anything major does happen. Apart from that, we'll then have our official preview out tomorrow for our Europa League return, and we'll confirm tomorrow whether we're doing a watch along or not on the evening itself. Please do smash the like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching.